What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Trooper format video, and this is going to be a pretty fun one. It's covering a deck that was recently discovered in the grand scheme of things in Edison format by a bunch of people. The YouTuber Zuczid was the one who really, sort of first created this and popularized it. So this is Winged Rhynos Control, or Rhynos Gadget, or whatever you want to call it. And basically the idea of this deck is that you've got the gadgets to search each other out, and you've also got Winged Rhynos, which is just a monster that is really annoying to deal with sometimes. You know, if you've got trap cards, you can bounce back to hand by using a trap. If your opponent tries to use like Sakura 2 armor, or I guess that's really the only thing that they're using in this format. I guess Mirror Force as well, but there's no dimensional prison or anything like that. So, you know, it's really just Saku, you know, but Bottomless exists as well, I guess. There are a bunch of traps that, you know, sort of Rhynos can bounce back against. This card can be really annoying for your opponent to beat. And if you manage to clear their resources and still have your own, then you can sort of control them out of the game. So it's a very, very interesting deck here. And because I'm adapting it from an idea that Zuczid had in Edison format, I basically adapted this list from Zuczid's most recent list that they featured on their channel. I'll leave a link to their channel in the description down below if you want to check out their videos on this in Edison format. But of course, since this deck was tailor-made for Edison format, I had to make some changes. So, you know, I couldn't include things like Dimpriz. I also wanted to include things that are legal in this format that are not in Edison format. For instance, I've got Snatch Steal and Comfy here. I put them in the side because, one, Comfy, I feel like it might not be necessary in the deck as a whole. If you know you're going first, it's good to bring in. But if you don't know you're going first, then I don't necessarily know it's what you want to be drawing later on in the game. Snatch Steal I have in here because I think it can set up some OTK lines, but also our deck is trying to control our opponent out of the game and remove their stuff constantly. So Snatch Steal is another removal card, to be fair. But I also think that it might not be as versatile as some of the other things here, although maybe I could just take it out for a smashing ground. So I should probably include the Snatch Steal in this deck in the future, but very powerful card that exists in this format, but not in Edison format. Also Triple Trap Dust Shoot in the side deck as well. This is for if you know you're going first. You can bring this in to increase your chances of being able to use it. For the side deck as well, we got Triple Pulling the Rug based on the decks that are running around Trooper format. We have Triple Needle Stealing as an interesting sort of tech that I want to try out. We've got Mind Crush here to, you know, deal with decks that search out a variety of things from deck to hand. We've also got Triple DD Crow for decks like T-Hero or Perfect Circle Monarch, or things that just, you know, try and utilize the graveyard to their fullest potential. DD Crow can hopefully stop it. For the rest of our deck, we've also added Triple Cider. I believe this was not in the Zuczid build, but I do like it here. It might not be online if you've just got a field of gadgets or Rhynos and stuff, but if you've got that field set up, you're probably in a good enough spot where you don't need this online, and then you can just bring it out when that board's cleared. But if you don't have that set up, or you've bounced a Rhynos to hand, then you can bring out the Cyber Dragon and attack over your opponent's stuff. So I really do like this card as an inclusion in the deck. For the other cards here, we got Heavy Storm, MST to deal with your opponent's back row. We got Triple Offerings to Doom. This was a tech that Zuczid had in the deck, so I'm trying it out here. Triple Smashing Ground to deal with their opponent's monsters as well. Triple Accumulated Fortune. I think in this format, when you don't have access to Legacy of Yatagarasu as well as Jar of Greed, I think this card is a bit worse. I wasn't impressed with this card in this format, so I'd probably cut it from future builds if you're trying to make this deck a little bit more competitive here. We got Triple Bottomless to deal with our opponent's stuff. We got Jar of Greed to draw deeper in our deck. Mirror Force to deal with their attacks. Double Reckless Greed to draw deeper in our deck. We got Arena Destruction to deal with their monsters, or just deal with the last bit of turn damage against them. Triple Sakura 2 Armor, and a TT as well. And that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck actually plays. Okay, we got our first game here against Rhynos, a frequent guest on the channel, and we're going to be diving in. We do get to go first, which is very nice here. So this is a pretty decent hand, all things considered. We're just going to go for a yellow, search out a green. We could have also brought out a Winged Rhynos, but I don't really think it's necessary at this point. We might as well get our gadget engine online. We're just going to set a Saku and a Jar of Greed here. If they have heavy, we just chain Jar. And, you know, it's not the best for us, but it's also not really the worst for us either. They go for Rhoda here for Stratos. We don't have a way to stop the Stratos, but they are going to get a search there of a Mali here. This tells us that they probably have a discard outlet for that. Oh, actually, they're going to go for Disc Commander instead. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. If they don't have like a discard outlet or something, you don't want to search out a Mali and then draw into another Mali later. That's pretty bad. So I'm just going to try and attack him with Stratos. We're going to Saku that and then draw into a Winged Rhynos. We could go for Jar of Greed here. But I feel like this is ultimately fine. If they do have a way to try and clear the Rhynos, we've got Jar to bounce it back, so I can use that here. But we're just going to try and attack in for 3k. And the 1200 will go through. Will the 1800 go through it? Well, it looks like it will indeed. We're just going to set an MST here, pass back to them, just trying to bluff that we have stuff here. They're going to go for a card trooper, milling 3, and then attacking over that Rhynos. So this will go through. Because we got another Rhynos in hand, I don't really feel the need to bounce back the Rhynos that we have on field. They go for call here. We're just going to MST that, stop the Stratos from coming back. So that way it can't get a search, can't attack over gadget. And we're feeling pretty good about this. We run into a green gadget here, but instead we're going to just summon out this winged Rhynos and attack over that trooper just to get in a little bit more damage here. There's arguments for just going for the gadget engine here. I don't hate those arguments as well. But since we have offerings here, I think it's fine just to set up a potential lethal push next turn if they summon out a monster here, but they're going to wisely set instead, and that makes things a little bit awkward for us. We can't really heavy here to try and clear the back row because offerings only targets face-up cards, so we have to attack into their monster first, so can be a bit of a risk. We're going to go for yellow, search out a green here, and then we're going to attack into their set. It is a Spirit Reaper. We're going to use an offerings on that, and that will actually be the end of the game, so we're able to outgrind our opponent there. So that was a pretty good one. Going into game 2, I don't really think there's much I'd change here. I didn't see Monarch stuff in the deck, so I didn't bring in pullings yet. Because I feel like, they're going first, and also Stratos is one of that they can get to in many ways, so they're likely to use it on the first turn. So my pullings would be dead after that if they're not playing a Monarch version of the deck. So they go for a D-draw, pitching the Mally. They go for Comfy, ripping the green out of hand, so now we don't have that engine online, and they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a DD Crow. Since they do have a Mally in Grave, I do just want to get that out of there right away. I figure they've got future plans for that. So we're just going to go for that, even though it does indicate that, these are some of the cards that they saw in our hand. But they don't know necessarily which ones they are. If they've got heavy, they've got heavy, but we can use the jar to at least draw off that. So that's something, but I think it's ultimately fine. They're going to go for a trooper here, attack in for 19 plus 18. We let the trooper go because 1, we can attack over it if we draw into a variety of things, and 2, they get a draw if we pop it there. So we're going to use Saku on the Stratos there. They go for Roto to search out a Disc Commander and then pass back to us. We draw another Saku. We go for a jar to try and draw into something good, and we draw into a red. So we're going to go for that red, search out a yellow here, and then attack over the trooper, at least attempt to. And they will ring the red, which I do think makes sense, given that we are running pretty low on life points now. We set the Saku, pass back to them, and they go for another trooper here, milling 3. They'll attack in for 19. We do take this because we can attack over the trooper with the yellow here, and then we can save the Saku for whatever they bring out to attack over the yellow. We draw into a Jar of Greed here, which is pretty good. We go for the yellow here, searching out a green, and now we can attack over that trooper, deal 800. And we feel pretty good about this, even though they do get a draw. We can set a jar here and then pass back to our opponent. Our opponent is just going to go for a D-draw, pitching that Disc Commander, drawing 2, and then setting another 2, passing back to us. We draw into Cyber Dragon. We could potentially summon out that Cyber Dragon if we so wish, but I don't really think we need to right now. It is awkward because we don't really want to attack into their monster there. We see 2 Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Masters in Grave, so if they do have a third one, we don't want to attack into that and then stack the top of our deck with a gadget. So we are actually just going to switch the yellow to defense and pass back. We're hoping to draw into a way to deal with their board a little bit more after we thin out our deck with the gadget engine here, but we're just not really doing that. We go for red here, search out a yellow, and we switch the green defense, and then I pass back to my opponent. I don't want to set the offering because if they've got heavy, I mean, this is a really juicy heavy for them. We don't really have any good offering targets to chain there. So I figure, if I save bottomless and offerings to hand, we get good follow-up for later. However, we do get punished by that when they bring out Jinzo. So they bring out Jinzo, and if we had offerings here, we could have used it on the Jinzo to turn back on our traps, but as is, the Jinzo comes down and makes us vulnerable to a lot of things. They flip up DD Warrior Lady here to attack over our yellow, and then they attack over the red with the Jinzo here. So we're running pretty low on life, and we've got this MST here. We go for a yellow just to search out the green there. We could have also just tribute summoned over the green gadget and attacked in the Warrior Lady with the Cyber Dragon, but I feel like that's a pretty bad plan because that leaves us open to death here. But we do go for offerings now on the Jinzo because I do want to have my traps online, and I also don't want them to blind snipe it with an MST in the end phase. We'll set an MST of our own, pass back to them. See what they do. They go for a D-draw, pitching a dasher, drawing 2 more. They're really deep in their deck. They go for a heavy here, and we will chain a jar to that. They're going to think on the jar, and they have a Mind Crush here, so they're actually able to use that to chain to the jar there, so they can get rid of that green out of our hand. And we do draw into a red, which is pretty decent, but they will spin back one of our greens with that Rhynos, go for a pre-mat here, and this should be the end of the game, because that's 12 plus 24 plus 15. So yeah, that is way over lethal. So I think that this game actually shows a major flaw with the deck here as well, where, you know, our opponent just set some cards, and we did not really have the tools to deal with those, you know. This deck is a bit light on aggressive pressure, and if your opponent just sets things that you don't want to attack into, then it can get really awkward for you. So that is a flaw with the deck. It may not be an insurmountable problem with the deck, but I do think it is a major limiting factor. We set 4 here. That may seem really weird, but we're using the dust shoot on this turn. We're using the jar as well, probably, if they go for a heavy. So realistically, we're in a pretty decent spot. We can set all this stuff without too much fear. We go for a dust shoot there to get a peek at their hand. We see that they've got a dust shoot of their own, a brain con, a D-draw, a Comfy, a Jujitsu Master, and a call. So dust shoot will shuffle back the Jujitsu Master, leaving them wide open here. So actually, I think this is a pretty winnable game for us here, because they just don't really have any monsters to do anything with here. So they're going to go for the Comfy just to rip a card out of our hand. They're going to rip the yellow, so that way our engine is offline there. And then they're going to set 2 pass back to us. We don't draw into more of our engine. We can just get in here with the red there. We could have also tributed over the gadget to bring out Cyber Dragon to try and increase the clock a little bit, but it wouldn't increase the clock that much. And if I draw into any other monsters here, I'm feeling pretty good. Like a red gadget, for instance, is a good monster to draw into here. So we go for red, grab into a yellow, and then we'll attack in for 2,600. Now, to play around the dust shoot that we know is in the back row there, we're going to set this bottomless pass back to them. So that way next turn, we're not drawing into that dust shoot. They do a brain con, so they can use that to take control of the red and then attack into this red. But that's 800 damage to them, and we still have this yellow. We're actually going to offerings here, so that way we can just summon out our yellow and try and push for lethal next turn. So they do set 1, so they do have a monster finally. And that means that they can use that next turn potentially, which is going to be pretty bad for us. We go for a jar here to draw into a Rhynos. And unfortunately, this does play into the dust shoot because we did not draw into a spell trap. I wanted to draw into a spell trap to potentially protect these a bit more than a bottomless would, because bottomless doesn't protect against trooper. But unfortunately, we did not draw into that. So that is rough for us, but we do draw into this MST, which we can use draw phase priority on to make it so that their dust shoot is not live there. So we blind MST into their back row, hit the call, which is the better of the cards for us to hit here because we can play around the other stuff. And we're going to attack into a trooper and then switch the yellow to defense, pass back. I do make a major mistake here. They go for a D-draw, pitching the Mally. Actually, I make a couple major mistakes here. They go for a Mally, and they go into a meta here for a Senshi. So Senshi is going to be annoying for our deck because they can pay 1,000 and negate traps, but they only have 2 trap negates. I go for 1 bottomless now, and they will pay to negate. And I think I actually should have activated another bottomless here because I believe I can activate 2. Given that it's happening in the same like timing basically, even though it's at different parts of the chain. So I think I can activate 2. I think I should have just activated another to get them down to 300 life points, which was a very risky spot to be in. But the bigger misplay that I made here was I was like, oh boy, I can preserve my Rhynos, I can bounce it back to hand, and you know, I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I decide to ultimately bounce back the Rhynos. I believe you can still do the Rhynos here because it is, you know, when this trap is activated, it doesn't have to be in response to that trap, I believe. I think it's just in that timing window. So I don't actually know if that's the case. If it's not the case, then let me know. But my reading for this is like, you know, if one player activates Sakuretsu Armor, the other player activates Book of Moon to set down their monster, then you activate Mirror Force, right? Like, you can do that sort of thing. So I think you can do this sort of thing with Rhynos as well, but I could be wrong with that. Either way, I should not have done this because now we've got 3 cards in hand. They're drawing into, or we're drawing into a 4th. And that'll turn on their dust shoot. So I knew about the dust shoot, and I just did this just because Rhynos has text on it. And it was very much not a good thing for me to do because they can shovel back my Cyber Dragon, which is currently the only way that I have to get over that Senshi. So this is not good for me. I draw into a bottomless here, so they are able to use the dust shoot, send back the Cyber Dragon, and that's just going to be rough for us. Now, if I had used up the bottomless as well here, and then had them negate that as well, and also not bounce the Rhynos as well, then, you know, I could summon out the Sidra. They had a Thing from Moonblast, which they might have used to spin it back, but if they did, then they would be pretty low on resources here, and also we'd be drawing the Sidra next turn, which would be online, which would not be the worst for us, although we would be taking a fair amount of damage here from their board. But they wouldn't be able to flip up these monsters out of fear of just dying. unless they drew into a back row next turn. But as is right now, we go for a green to grab out a red because it's kind of all we've got to do right now. We set a bottomless here as well, pass back to them. And as you can see here, they drew into troopers, so they probably would have just attacked in for 2,000 with the Sentry, and then we would have been able to summon out the Sidra, attack over Sentry, and then had Sidra on field again this turn for some big damage plays. So they would have just been setting like troopers and things like that, drawing deep into their deck, but we'd be potentially drawing deeper into our deck for things like Ring of Destruction or just ways to deal with their board. So I feel like we would have been in a pretty decent spot. Of course, this deck does take a while to kill, and I'm just going to play with both hands revealed now, because after that misplay, this is kind of just a slow losing battle. Like, we will be losing this eventually, especially when we just draw into more Rhynos and Gadgets, which don't really do anything because these are all monsters that you just have to normal summon out. We got one normal summon per turn, so this is all we're really doing here. We're just trying to deck thin, hoping that we don't draw more of our monsters, but it is just not looking good here. So they're going to attack into this yellow. They would have drawn into another Phoenix Wing here. I mean, you can get sort of a sense of it. I think actually, even if we drop them down to 200 life points after beating over the Sentry, we still would have lost this thing, just based on the inevitability that their deck has compared to our deck. Like, they've got a Reaper set here. We could have potentially drawn into a way to deal with that Reaper, but it's just not looking good for us here. But we get to mitigate the effect of their Phoenix Wing there by just going for Jar to draw into the yellow, but they do have lethal on board here with the Snatch on the green, and then just all the monsters getting flipped up here. So that will be the end of the game. So I think, again, we would have lost this either way, but my misplay definitely made it so that we 100% lost it, which is a bit of a flaw with this deck. Like, I do think there may not a flaw with this deck, but the feature of this deck, you know? In order to win games consistently with this deck, I think you do really need to make sure you never misplay, because one misplay with this deck and it can be curtains, because the deck just really needs to be methodical about what it's doing. It really needs to be thinking about its resources versus its opponent's resources and how it can actually eventually grind out those resources to close out the game. But as shown here, like, you know, the opponent has some ways to get around that. For instance, setting their monsters in a way that we can't really deal with because a lot of our things are reactive does stymie the deck quite a bit. And if decks can, like, set their monsters and buy time until they pull into their OTK stuff, or maybe not even OTK stuff, but majorly aggressive stuff, then they can potentially win from that. In addition, you know, you just wind up in situations where you're drawing into, like, Gadgets and Rhynos, and this is a problem that you do get in other Gadget decks as well, where you just draw into your monsters, and that can be really bad for you because you don't have ways to protect them, even if you're getting that resource engine online. But the Rhynos kind of make that worse because, you know, you're drawing into your Rhynos as well as your Gadgets, and the Rhynos do a lot less for you than the Gadgets do. So I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of this deck compared to just a typical Gadget deck in this format. I think it's a very, very cool idea, and it's cool to see us trying to sort of transplant an idea from Edison to here. And maybe, you know, I'm just not skilled enough with the deck to actually show off its full potential here. Maybe, you know, this deck is actually a lot better than making it out to be, and, you know, it's a tier 1 threat. I don't necessarily think it's at that region, but if you do feel passionately about this deck, definitely try it out for yourself because it is very, very interesting. Of course, before we end the video, I got another match to show off with this deck, and it is going to be a fun one. Okay, for the last match of the video, we've got a game against a World of Dark Arm God, who has been playing this deck in a lot of my previous videos and been playing this deck on the Discord a lot as well. If you want to play games in Trooper format or any other format that I featured on the channel, head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server in the description down below. But they've been playing this Rhynos deck a lot. They really believe in it, so it's, you know, only fitting that for our final game here, we actually get a sort of mirror match against them, although we are playing some slightly different things, I'm pretty sure. So we go for the Cyber Dragon here, then we go for the green to search out a red. So we'll grab that red there. And we have a hand that's sort of clogged on Gadgets a bit, and that is very unfortunate for us. This accumulated fortune a lot worse when we have a hand clogged with Gadgets than it would be otherwise. But we still set the accumulated and the mirror force here because I don't think they're going to heavy their board, and if they do heavy their board, they're probably setting up chains, so we can potentially use the accumulated fortune for that. They do blind snipe the mirror force, which is a very, very good hit on their part. I'm not sure if I would have blind sniped a card there, but they also activate Blasting Fuse, which is definitely a card. It is a card that was used in some early Zuczid build. Maybe I should have been playing around it, but it just honestly was not on my radar. And Blasting Fuse is one of those cards that once it happens once, it sort of never happens again, because now for the rest of the game, I'm going to be playing around Blasting Fuse, because I know about it now, right? I'm not going to summon a card into this column here that has a macro of their own. I'm going to summon it to a different column. I'm going to play around that. So technically, it's always optimal to play around Blasting Fuse, but the card comes up so little that most people effectively don't. But it is something that, once you see, I'm just going to keep playing around it. And that does make it a bit worse in the deck. I think that Blasting Fuse is not worth playing in the deck, even though it is very funny. And I think that's the conclusion that Zuczid also reached in Edison format, where it just doesn't really do enough. And also, it's too hard to set up. And also, once your opponent knows about it, it will never go off again. But we're going to attack in for a fair amount of damage here. So our opponent does get that Rhynos back, but we are just punching in with Rhynos, or not with Rhynos, but with gadgets every turn. And that is good enough for us here. So they're going to pass back to us. We draw into a jar, which is pretty nice. We are going to summon out this yellow here, and this will be lethal if this turn goes through, but they do have a TT here, so they're able to bounce back everything there. That's fine by us. We can just set a jar here and get a search of that green with the yellow, and then pass back to them. They're going to go for that Rhynos again, attack in for 18, but again, this is fine. We do have smashing to deal with the Rhynos, so that's pretty good. And we draw a Rhynos of our own if we really want it. We go for the green here, and we get to search out a red. And red will not have anything to search, but we can just summon out a green next turn, potentially, and do that. We've got smashing for the Rhynos here. They've got Mirror Force for the green, and now I know that Mirror Force and TT are gone, which is a big load off my shoulders. They go for green here, searching out that red, and so now they've got their gadgets online. They're going to attack in for 1,400 here, and they're going to pass back to us. We draw a Ring of Destruction, which is a pretty good card. We go for Rhynos here because that can beat over the green that they've got. And also, if they've got any battle traps here, we can use Rhynos to bounce. So we get to attack over the green, dealing 400. And then we're so close to setting up a kill with Ring. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But maybe we can get there pretty soon. They go for a yellow here, and they're going to search out a green, grabbing that to hand. And they're going to pass back to us. We draw a bottomless trap hole here. We go for a green. I'm not really needing to play around Blasting Fuse now, because this is going to be the end of the game most likely. And then we attack over the yellow with the green. That'll go through. We attack indirectly with the Winged Rhynos here. They go for call on their own Winged Rhynos. And I'm just going to ring my own Winged Rhynos here. Because, I could try and ring theirs, but they could bounce back to hand. If they've got another battle trap, this won't be the end of the game here. But I don't really think that they have any other thing to do here to my other Winged Rhynos. Could be wrong, but I feel like they would have used it already, either on the green, most likely on the green, because, Rhynos isn't really, it can't be used like with a Sakura to armor or something like that. Like that stuff doesn't affect the Rhynos, right? They could have like shrink or something, that is true. So if they shrink my own Rhynos here, then that could be bad. But I think, again, I might be able to use Rhynos in that timing anyways, especially if I activate Jar and then bounce back the Rhynos to hand. So, I think it is ultimately still fine for us here. So, I think we'd win this spot either way here. So I think it is safe to go for the ring on the Rhynos. And they've just got another Blasting Fuse, which again, we knew to play around it the entire time. So that's what we did. And that's why Blasting Fuse is not really the best card, but still fun to see it go off at least once. So we got that for the video, for the content. We're going to be going into game 2 here. There's going to set 2, summon out a Rhynos, pass back to us. We draw a green gadget. We're just going to bring out a gadget here. We are summoning into a column that could have Blasting Fuse, but we're just not going to set any back row into that slot. So we're just going to set 3, pass back to them, and see what happens here. They go for another Rhynos. They're going to try attacking over the green. We will take that. Our Saku and Ring do not do anything here. We don't really have anything in the side deck for Winged Rhynos decks. I guess Dust Shoot maybe, but we went second, so I didn't want to bring that in. We go for a Reckless here to draw 2 deeper into our deck. We draw into double Sidra, so that's pretty good. We can bring out 1 Sidra and then go for a Winged Rhynos here as well to attack into both their field here. They've got Shrink, though, for our Sidra, which is going to be quite annoying because that will indeed deal with the Sidra. But we can still crash our Winged Rhynos into their Winged Rhynos. We're going to bounce back our Winged Rhynos after they go for the Saku there, and then special summon out a Cyber Dragon. We're going to set an Accumulated Fortune, pass back to them, because I feel like, we've got a Ring, which is chainable. We've got Accumulated Fortune, which is chainable. And so we can go Saku, use Ring, and then use Accumulated Fortune as well once they try and bounce back the Winged Rhynos. They go for a Mobius here. I was not expecting the Mobster. And that's going to be quite unfortunate for us because they do hit the Saku, the one non-chainable card here. If they hit the ring and the accumulated, then I could go chain ring and then chain accumulated. Or I actually can't chain accumulated because that's only 3. But I can still go chain ring and at least get some value and still have a card on field here. But as is, I just have to ring their Mobius because that can beat over the Cyber Dragon. And, you know, it is what it is. I could have waited to the battle phase. I probably should have waited to the battle phase to do that, in all honesty. Yeah, I guess I should have just waited till the battle phase, but either way, it worked out pretty much the same. We're going to go for a green here, grabbing a red, and then we can potentially beat over this winged Rhynos if all goes well, and we're going to hope that it does. Unfortunately, they do have a Saku for that, so I could have summoned out another winged Rhynos to play around the Saku, but I felt like it was better getting my engine online, and I can always bring out this winged Rhynos on the following turn to crash into their Rhynos, so I feel like this is ultimately okay. They're going to go for a green, searching at a red here, and now they're getting in for 1,800. So maybe I shouldn't have, gone for the green. Maybe I should have gone for the Rhynos instead to crash because we'd be taking 1,400 here. So we'd still be very low, but we might be in a bit of a better spot. But Reckless is still online, so we can't really do anything else here. So we just got to go Winged Rhynos attack into their green, but we know they've got a gadget as follow-up in hand. I mean, Gramble also works as follow-up in hand. So, yeah, that'll just be the end of that game there. And now we go on to game 3. That was a bit of a rough one for us. I think we maybe could have played it a bit differently, but it sort of shows my issues with accumulate. There just aren't enough chainable traps in this format to use with it. I could have waited a turn to save the Reckless to build an accumulated chain. That is an option, but I really wanted to clear their field there, and I felt I needed to Reckless to actually draw into something to do that with. So, you know, it definitely was potentially a flaw on my part, but it is what it is. We're going to go for yellow here, searching out a green, and we got a really good hand here, so I'm feeling good about this overall. We're going to set a Dust Shoot and a Saku. We go for the Dust Shoot here, just get a peek at their hand. See, they've got a green gadget, a Mobius, an Electric Virus. Electric Virus, very interesting tech card in this format, but that is pretty bad for us, because if we leave them with the Mobius, they can Electric Virus and, you know, tribute over the yellow to pop the Saku, which we don't want. So we could take either the Electric Virus or the Mobius just to get that threat out of the picture. But I feel like Electric Virus, like any tribute monster that they get, Electric Virus turned on, which we don't necessarily want. And it could also lead to some potential OTKs. So I think it's better just to try and keep them off of the Mobius. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to deal with that virus right now, get it out of the picture, and leave my Sakuretsu armor online. So, they're just going to set 1, not going for the green. They might have the read that I have pulling the rug, which is a reasonable read to have there, given that I left them with the gadget. And also they do have TT here, so I guess they want to use it on our monsters here as opposed to losing one of their own. But I think ultimately it still makes sense to go for green because you want to thin out your deck, get your gadget engine going, if that is the worry. And they will indeed go for that green, going for the red here. And, yeah, they're going to attack him for 14. I'm just going to use Saku on that just to clear it. I could have also waited and just gone for Cyber Dragon instead. But I feel like I can save Cyber Dragon for a bit later. And also I want to turn on my heavy soon. So we're just going to attack in with the green. They've got ring for that. And so now our life points are equalized. We're going to set an accumulated fortune here, pass back to them. I could have set a heavy storm instead. But knowing about that Mobius makes me a bit antsy here. So I just want to set the accumulated instead. They're going to attack in with this red here after searching a yellow, getting in for 13, and then they're just going to set 1 pass back to us. We draw a yellow here, so we can go green, and this is a misplay on my part. I should have gone Cyber Dragon and then green, because I know they've got a shrink, and this did not help us here. So this was a major misplay on my part, and I knew it at the time, too. This was like my plan for the following turn. And for some reason, when the turn came around, I was like, oh, gadget stuff. And I just went for a gadget. So that is a skill issue on my part. I should have gone for the Sidra here and then the green because the shrink cannot deal with both of them. So either way, I'm keeping a monster on my side of the field. And now I feel the need of smashing that red to play around the shrink to basically keep that offline, which is not really the best for me. And they've got another back row here. I could heavy storm the board as well. But they're just going to use the shrink up now. So this will attack over the green there, and then they're going to pass back to us. We draw Offerings, which is a decent card to clear some stuff. I figure, you know, we're never getting this accumulated online. We got all monsters here. We could potentially go like Summon Red, Offerings. That's only 2, so that doesn't even do anything here. So, yeah, building up the chain here, it does not really seem that feasible, so I just want to heavy and wipe the board there. Now we can summon out the Sidra that we wanted to use the previous turn. And now we can go for a yellow to search out a green here. So now we can attack over the yellow with the Sidra, attack indirectly with the yellow here. And I think all we've got left is this offerings here. So we'll set that, pass back to our opponent. They're going to set one, go for a green. So green can search out a red here. But I still feel ultimately pretty good here. They got smashing. Okay, so they are going to smashing our Sidra, which is unfortunate for us, but we can still bring out a green and potentially crash into that. Or we could just use this offerings here to pop it, which I do think is pretty decent because now we can just get really aggressive here. I accidentally forgot to shut off auto draw. But now we can just get aggressive, summing out a green here and trying to get that search. Unfortunately, they do have pulling, so they did side that in against us here. We could have also sided in pulling against them. But I figured we had enough other removal to be fine. But yeah, now they've got Electric Virus, and things are going to get pretty bad for us because they've got this Mobius here that can attack in for 24. So we're down a bit bad. We draw into Mirror Force, though, which is very, very nice. And I make another major misplay here. I just played this last game really, really badly. I think earlier I actually didn't get one of my gadget searches, which is also bad. But I've gone through all the yellows, so there's no target to search here. So I should have just set the red and then set a Mirror Force. Played around smashing, played around a lot of things. But I did not do that. So luckily we drew this Mirror Force, and we just managed to win from that. But I do think that, you know, I really should have played this last game a bit better, but it is in the mirror. So the mirror is very fun, and we got to see more of the mirror because I misplayed tremendously. So there is always a silver lining to that sort of thing, I guess. But yeah, top deck Cyber Dragon, we contribute over the red and then attacking for lethal damage there. So yeah, very, very fun to end on the mirror match. But I do think that the first match against a more meta deck shows that, like, I don't really think this deck is like tier 1 level. I think it might be tier 2. But I also think that, like, if you want to play gadgets in this format, you should probably just play regular gadgets. I don't think the Rhynos stuff does enough for you yet. I know that the deck does have some legs in Edison format. I mean, it got second at a YCS in Edison, so that's pretty cool. But I think in Trooper format, it's not quite there yet. Maybe with more tinkering, it can get a bit better, but I do think that you're probably better off just playing regular gadgets if you want to play the deck. But that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments down below, what you think about this deck as well. I hope that you enjoyed as always. If you want to play Game Trooper again, head on over to my Discord server, links in the description. Also, if you want to see more videos like this, then subscribe to the channel because I release these fairly frequently. So stay tuned for more of these. Also, as always, big shout outs to my patrons, Rintwin, Portrapcoon, Breadknocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFS, Dump Truck, and Scout Zero. It means a lot that you all support and encourage to make more videos like this in the future. Again, I hope you enjoyed as always. Until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, signing off.